Welcome to Lickin' on Lending, the podcast that dives deep into the heart of the mortgage industry. Your host, David Lickin, bringing you the latest insights, trends, and updates from the world of mortgages. Whether you're a seasoned industry veteran or just getting started, this show is your go-to source for all things mortgage. On Lickin' on Lending, we're not just about delivering information, we're about delivering it in a way that's lively, engaging, and yes, even entertaining. You'll hear from a wide range of regular contributors, experts who make the complexities of the mortgage business not just understandable, but enjoyable. Our goal? To keep you informed on the operational aspects of the industry. Everything from regulations and compliance to technology and market trends, without ever being boring. We believe that staying up to date doesn't have to be dull, and our interactive conversational style ensures you'll be hooked from the get-go. So get ready for detailed discussions, lively debates, and a wealth of knowledge that will help you navigate the ever-changing landscape of the mortgage industry. Let's get started. This is Lickin' on Lending. Now your host, David Lickin.
Good to have you back with another podcast, listeners. I'm excited to bring on a real special friend, Sue Woodard. You all know Sue. There's no question about it. She's like on every channel of Facebook or LinkedIn or social media. She dominates, and she's, more importantly, just such an incredible human being. When I first started working with Sue, I was like, can she be real? She's so pleasant. And then I heard her speak, and I was just blown away with her speaking ability. And I go, can she be real? And then you get to know her personally, and you go, oh my gosh, this is one of the most special people on the planet. So I'm really excited to have you, Sue, joining us on the podcast today.
Gosh, I'm going to come here more often. This is like the most uplifted I've been in a long time. Thank you. Thanks for having me. Truly, it's my honor.
Joining me on the podcast. In fact, we got to give Alan Pollock the credit for this podcast because he read something you wrote, Sue, that was really something that's significant. He said, Dave, we got to get Sue on the podcast. And he said, you know her? I said, oh, yeah, really, dear personal friend. And he says, let's go for it. So, Alan, would you tee up for our listeners what we're going to be talking about?
Yeah, the topic was amazing, being on the vendor side and the lender side for so many years. Hearing what you said about, I think it was relationship counseling, was just spot on. So the title of the podcast today, I thought this was great. Inside the Mind of Sue Woodard, Unpacking the Human Element of Mortgage Tech Relationships. And I've got an opening icebreaker for you, Sue. In the world of ChatGPT, I couldn't write this all on my own. I had to ask for a few tips, and GPT did a good job on this one. So here's what GPT said. So, Sue, let's settle this right now. Who's the bigger problem in lender-vendor relationships, the lenders or the vendors? And do they need a prenup or just a good therapist?
I'd be curious to know what ChatGPT would answer to itself from that question, but
Absolutely.
It's a good question. And yes, this is from my article, Couples Therapy. And I think it's too late for a prenup. These folks need a therapist. And it's interesting. It's just like real life relationships. Some people stay in the partnership because they have a contract in place, but they're really not very happy. Some people feel like they made a good choice, but they've got these recurring frustrations that come up. And then every now and then you see a truly healthy, happy, positive relationship. Not that it's without its challenges, but they seem to have found a way to resolve it with or without therapy. So it's, like I said, neither are at fault. It's just a little bit.
I think you raise a really good point there, Sue, because there are so many people that are frustrated with their various vendors, and it can be very much a love-hate relationship. And that's when it says, Dave, you got to read this article Sue wrote. And first of all, I don't know what you're a better speaker or a better writer. That was so well written. And it really shined the light on what I think is an issue that I want lender listeners to plug into, and maybe our vendor listeners as well, because the key is, how do you get to this point where you have that unusual, so I think that sadly is more of an unusual relationship where it just works?
Yeah, that's really a good point. I think having been on the lender side myself and on the vendor side, I'm now in this unique position as a consultant where you can see it, much like a therapist, in a little bit more of a rational, non-emotional way. And I think some of the answers to it are just very similar to, and I know we'll unpack some of this, but it's very similar to any relationship, right? When you think about the building blocks of a healthy relationship, it's about open communication is one of the most important things. Trust, owning up to it when you've made a mistake, having empathy, all of these things that are super foundational. And we do have some specific things to talk about in the lender-vendor relationship. And I say vendor, by the way, particularly rather than partner, even though I always talk about vendors as partners. It's just sometimes can get complicated in consulting land to talk about partners. And so we're calling it lender and vendor in this particular conversation, but it's not the same thing. It's not really exactly an equal partnership. It's got nuance to it that a human relationship between people, two partners, don't really have. And so I know we'll get into some of the particular tactics.
Being on both sides, and David and I have been there as well. What would be one good example, just to tee off this conversation of somebody that needed relationship help? You don't have to name anybody, please don't. But what would be a good example?
Well, I can say myself, when I was on the lender side, the customer side, I think very often, certainly I was in a position of saying, why can't the technology just work this way? Why can't they just fix it? Why does it take them so long to fix it? Why can't it just work like this? And I think we even feel that way. We're just consumers of technology broadly anyways, where we constantly feel that way. Like, why doesn't it just do what I want it to do? And I think then having spent the last couple of decades more on the technology, the vendor side, from that position, it's like, why don't they listen to us when we tell them how to do it? Why don't they actually execute like they said they were going to? Why are they trying to make it look like the last technology partner that they were with, that they left? Right?
Absolutely.
That's what they say is the only perfect technology is the one that you just came off of. Yeah. And so I think there's frustrations rampant on both sides, and I've experienced it on both sides, and you probably have as well, as probably all of our listeners.
Yeah, one of the things you talk about is the human element in mortgage technology. There's technology and it's a human element. Without question, it's what I think I hear you say. I'd like you to expound on that. It seems to be by far the human element, far more than the technology element. Expound on that.
The mortgage industry, as you certainly both know, as well as our listeners here, this is a very people-centric business. It's what the mortgage industry really is based on. It's humans moving into homes where their whole life happens, right? Where their joys and pains and marriage and divorce and babies and graduation, like their whole world happens inside of a home. So this is a very people-y business, and we are people serving people.
I like that. People-y. That's good.
Yeah, it is. It is, right? And I think sometimes I really pull up and remember that also all of us in this industry, we're people too. We're human people living human lives with human tendencies and weaknesses and brilliances and all the things. And I think sometimes I've always tried to, when I'm been on this situation, either on the lender side or the vendor side, and there's a lot of frustration, I always try to remember when somebody's maybe expressing their frustration in not the most positive, constructive way. This is a real person that I don't know what's going on in their life. Maybe they have some kind of terrible personal situation happening. Who knows? And so I do think that as we look at kind of the lender-vendor dynamic, I have seen wonders worked by really remembering, moving quickly and working on a human level to connect with the other frustrated human and operating with some grace, with some humility, taking your licks when you need to, owning your part of the problem, the fighting to defend a point of view, maybe even when you're right, or hiding behind your keyboard, or it can sometimes, you might win that they're not going to break up the contract in the short run, but it ultimately costs you when you can't make that human connection. I've just seen it repeated over and over and over in this industry.
That's very interesting to say that. So on the vendor side, you get this passion, right? The people are very passionate about the product they've created. They've spent nights, weekends. They've done everything they can to get it to work, and you're that one customer that just didn't fit right. And then on the lender side, you're just busy. You don't have time for this. What would you suggest that a lender and a vendor can do together to get over that aspect of it? I have an opinion on it, but I'd rather hear your opinion because I have a feeling you're going to probably say the exact same thing.
I think there's a lot of different things in terms of, if we're talking about how to create a more human connection. I think it's one of the big reasons that I believe so much in conferences. It's very hard to get face to face when people's companies are now remote, right? It used to be you could go to HQ, get together with everybody and really handle things in a more face to face where you can read the body language and facial expressions and hear the person who's making weird noises in the corner and you can tell they're mad. It's harder to do that. And so it's, as I said, one of the big reasons that I believe in going to conferences, I don't love the phrase belly to belly because it conjures up weird things, but face to face with people, show up, be in person, know their pains, and show that you not only care about what their pain points are, but you actually have solutions to help them solve.
Yeah, and it really starts with relationships. What you're talking about there, Sue, is the relationship component of this. We are a relationship driven business. You could say that about every business to a certain degree, but certainly something as emotionally charged as doing a mortgage for
Absolutely.
someone's life is one of the most emotionally charged transactions at times in someone's life. So when you're talking about establishing a relationship, what tips would you have for the lender that's listening to this, that's thinking about making a switch of their LOS or their CRM or something like that, and also the vendor that's communicating with them? What are some things that you'd say, this is Sue Woodard's counseling tips as you go into this for the relationship?
My counseling tips. I think some of the biggest things is people are either contemplating technology, a new technology, or I think maybe importantly right now, contemplating removing a technology or thinking about continuing this relationship. I think some of the really key things that vendors can do is really insisting on executive business reviews. We used to call them quarterly business reviews or QBRs, getting face to face in that way, or at least connecting, even if it's digitally.
You're talking about after the installation's been done.
I'm talking about steady state. And we can go back to, if you want to go back to the buying process, because I have some thoughts on that as well. I think just, again, my experience has been that it's, hey, we'll get together when we can get together. And all of a sudden, a year and a half has gone by. And so I think, again, just like any relationship, I'm a big believer in putting those dates on the calendar to get together at a regular cadence. And for the lenders listening, show up to those. We, again, in some of my experience, we changed the name from quarterly business reviews to executive business reviews because we want the executives there. It doesn't help if the same people who are talking every day in, day out. You actually need decision makers to be there and actually understand.
That's actually something interesting, because what I've noticed a lot is the executives sometimes are involved in the beginning and then they drift off, and they seem to only get involved if there's an issue or if contract negotiations come up or there's a conference. So are you almost suggesting that if you're an executive of a lender and you're listening right now, you should be more involved in not only being a champion, but you should be involved in the ongoing reviews that you're talking about? Make sure what goals have been met. That's what you're saying, right?
100%. And again, I understand the tech stacks are large and maybe you can't be there all the time. It's a challenge I would give to vendors to make sure that if you have executives who aren't able to attend, have some kind of executive summary that's going out regularly about what you're doing, where their wins have been. I just think sometimes it gets very disconnected after the initial purchase was made. It's, to go back to your early question, David, very often when people are making a technology decision, they're not bringing in all the internal stakeholders that they should along the way. Now, LOS, you mentioned, that's a whole different ball of wax than many technologies because it's a heart and lung transplant, right? That's an enormous change. Yeah, but I think even with any technology that's being implemented or as it's being considered, I just think that's a really key consideration is bringing in those right internal stakeholders. Very often I see companies talking to executives, oh yeah, this seems great, it's going to be awesome. It's plopped into the hands of a technical or administrative team, marketing team, in some cases technical team, and they're like, what is this? Why did we buy this? What are we doing? I already have a full-time job. Now I have to do what for the next how many weeks? So it's, again, making sure that those expectations are set ahead of time, whether it's LOS, POS, PPE, automated marketing, any number of the things that are out there. It's setting those expectations. And probably one of the key things is understanding upfront, why are you buying this? Okay. And really crystallizing it. I used to challenge the sales team to capture that actually in our own CRMs at the technology company. I'd say, you capture, why are they buying? What's the most important reason they're buying? Because we got to hang on to that and keep pointing back to that in time, just like you need to in a relationship. Why did we get married in the first place? I can't stand you today. Here's why, because we have these sets of shared values, and this is the why that we're together. But I think very often it gets swept up in the romance of the sale, and nobody remembers 6 months later, why did we even do this?
Yeah, and you hit on something there that I want to go into. We agree on core values, but we're in a dynamic, interesting industry, Sue, where core values are shifting because the core values that worked in the past. This is where the analogy to being a marriage per se versus married to the technology is different, because business plans change. The need to adjust what was working isn't working for many people now. So when that happens, how do you advise someone to work through that?
Again, this is where I think the regular communication points are so critical at an executive level, because you just can't know if you don't ask. And it's very easy that, again, if the right conversations aren't happening, you've got admins talking to admins, but there's big business shifts happening. And suddenly people are leaving a technology and they may not even know, hey, we actually can help you with this new business strategy that you have. But if the technology vendor isn't privy to what this new strategy is and isn't able to relay how they can help in that situation. So again, it's why I'm such a huge advocate of making sure that the right conversations are happening with the right people on a very regular basis, because to your point, the targets move a lot, just like in real life.
Yeah. Let me just interject this real fast, Alan. Listeners, we're going to put a link to the article that both Alan and I read. Actually, Alan read it. He forwarded it to me. He said, you got to read this. It's really good. And so we both read it. And so we're going to put a link into that. And listeners, several times we're going to reference that article. Everything we're talking about is pretty much in that article, but we're getting a fresh take. My attitude on doing podcasts is I don't need to do a podcast and report the article. Go read the article. We're talking about what we pulled out of that. And so what we're hoping is this will motivate you to go read that article. It's really well written.
Thank you.
Alan?
And actually, David, it's timely, right? We're at the beginning of the new year. On the podcast today, we talked about you've done everything you can. You've reshuffled the deck chairs, which is unfortunate in a lot of cases. But the reality is it's time to figure out what you're going to do for the rest of the year, right? Put that strategy to action, figure out, do you have the right features turned on? And I'm going to get to that in a second. But what's really interesting is we used to call it a roadshow. I'm curious what you think of this, Sue. We would get a couple of us folks and we would start in New Jersey and head all the way to California and back. And we would go visit our customers. And you know what we found out? We found out customers were not happy when they didn't tell us. We found out that features did or didn't work. We found out that people wanted to buy more product from us that we didn't realize. And so that face-to-face that you're talking about, that's where I'm getting at. As a vendor, if you're listening, I think what Sue's saying, I'm going to let you say it, but I'm going to feed you with the words, is get out there, go see people. If you can't make it to a conference, do one big trip. Grab a car and drive across country, but go see your customers. And you know what happens in the end after that? Is that you create a relationship. So if you have an issue and you sit down with the CEO of a lender and they have a problem, they're going to call you now. They're not going to ask someone to call support. They're going to reach out to you directly because you shook their hand. You were the one that was face to face. That's the relationship. I know we're going to get to partner and vendor mindsets in a little bit, but I jumped there and I didn't mean to, but I just wanted to, see if you agreed with that, Sue, and that's what you would suggest as well.
100%, 100%. Yeah. It's harder now, like I said, because you don't always have everybody consolidated at HQ, but you can make plans, whether it is get on the road. I'm a huge believer in that because you solve things in different ways. Again, like we're talking about, you see the body language, you get the right people in the room. Hopefully you go break bread together and you have different level of conversation, but you are spot on. The things that come up in those conversations when you're physically with each other is just, it's unlike any other experience. And again, I just think this is a business there's a lot of human connection in this business. And I'm a huge believer in technology. Somebody heard me speak recently and they said, wow, this human stuff flies in the face of all the technology. I'm like, no, it all goes together. I love technology. Technology is there to support the human. But when we're talking about these relationships between lender and vendor, yes, the human element cannot be overstated enough. And I love the roadshow tactic. Been on many roadshows. Some more fun than others.
Absolutely. Yeah, I've got a story about an old CEO. He and I went up on a nude beach in California by mistake. So
that one's never happened to me, bro.
Turns out there's one in San Diego. But we quickly left. But anyways, if anyone's ever read your LinkedIn or been friends with you, your comment of being belly to belly, for you, it's almost aisle 12, seat A and B next to each other. Because your airplane posts for the last couple of years are absolutely hysterical. And you run into the same travel problems that everyone runs into.
Indeed. I do have a series of public service announcements for frequent travelers. You'll certainly appreciate it. And actually, when I tease about belly to belly, I love one of the things that I think there's not enough of in some of these relationships is really just showing your customer some love. And I have always talked about that in my career. And so I'm a big hugger. I always tell people, if you're a hugger, you better come at me with your hands like this. Otherwise, you're going to get a hug.
Yeah. And so hugs are the best. They really are.
David, to you and Sue, how often does somebody say to you, oh, you got to go watch this online, and you don't know what platform it's on, right? You got to search everywhere for it. You're trying to figure out, you Google it, it's on 8 platforms. 2, you have to pay to rent it. 3, you're subscribed to. 1, you're not, right? Do you guys run into that problem all the time?
We solved that by being on every platform known to man.
Yeah, there you go.
So I think I'm on every platform now at this point on that. But I think that really opens up a great question. Sue, are you finding some platforms for social media, this kind of departure off the media topic, that are more effective for you? I lean towards LinkedIn. What do you find yourself leaning towards?
I am almost strictly B2B. So I have chosen LinkedIn as really my place to be, because I got kicked off of Facebook just for a day, but it made me so mad that I just was like, maybe was having this fun conversation with Ginger Bell, and she was describing like whatever. And I said, "Ooh, that sounds so fun. I might come kidnap you." And the word kidnap got me booted off of Facebook for a couple of days. And I was so ticked that I'm like, so my daughter loves to laugh at me because I'm a lurker on Twitter. I just lurk around and read things. And then I'm active on LinkedIn. And I have consciously decided that's where, at least for this time in my life, that's where it ends for me.
Yeah, that's really good.
That's great.
I agree with you 100%. When you look at the unique challenges of mortgage tech relationships, you talk about this in your article. What are you seeing that is unique? Because we talked about this is like every other relationship, but there are unique aspects. What are the ones that are unique that you draw out in that article and that you would think is important to have as a walk away from this?
Yeah, I think some of the uniquenesses are certainly that it's not an equal relationship, right? Someone is the client and somebody is the partner or vendor providing to that client. And again, I know, and I'm a strong believer in talking about that it is a partnership. Both people have to do their part, but it's not equal when somebody's paying money to somebody else. And so I think there's just a certain nuance there. And so I think some of the things that I think about are lenders sometimes need to be honest about, have you really done your part? Have you really looked at the best practices? Are you trying to wedge this technology into a way that you want it to work that maybe is outdated? And if you actually would pull up a little bit and listen to your technology provider who's got the benefit of working across a lot of different companies, and they know actually what works really well, and having the ability to be a little flexible there. Vendors very often forget about the fact that lenders have 18 trillion things that they're thinking about on any given day. Any technology company out there, you said it earlier, David, this is like what they dreamed of. They laid awake at night. They invested their life savings into. This is the biggest deal in the world to them, right? A lender, you're a blip in the screen, right? Of all the different worries and concerns and people and fundings and pipelines and hedging. And there's a world of problems out there. And so sometimes I think vendors need to have the awareness that it's not an equal relationship. They're not thinking about you as much as
like to think they were.
Only when the bill comes.
Yes.
But they're not thinking about you anyway.
Yes, exactly. They're just not that into you. But again, it's a not level relationship. But I would say it is, because of that, the onus really is on the vendor partner to establish some of these things. I don't think the onus is on the lender to be like, hey, we need to set up regular touch points, and hey, I need to do that. Onus is on the vendor to set up those touch points. But there is a responsibility on the part of the lender that you got to show up. You got to do your part. Right. And we haven't even talked about ROI, which is an interesting thing on this particular topic as well.
Let's go there for a minute. Let's talk
let's
talk about it.
Well, I think people need to be fair about ROI, because I think very often it's the biggest thing that we hear from people in the industry right now, right? Everybody's looking at their tech stack and saying, what's the ROI? What's the ROI? And ROI can be measured in a lot of different ways. And it's not just what dollars is this bringing or how many more fundings is this bringing in. In fact, if that were the case, every technology that was purchased at the beginning of 2020, people would be like, look what I did to your volume. Amazing. Aren't you so glad that you purchased this technology?
1,000% ROI.
Right?
Yeah.
Yes. And it doesn't have anything to do with it. In fact, maybe they were so busy they didn't even have time to use your technology. But it makes truly trying to relay ROI in the mortgage industry very difficult, because it's not so easy as like, you do this and this happens because we got interest rates and the market moving in the background. So there are actually a lot of different ways that ROI can be defined. Maybe it's table stakes for your originators, because this is something that they need in order to operate, and they have an expectation that's going to be there for them to use as a selling tool. Maybe it's something that helps you prevent compliance risk. Right? There can be all kinds of different things. It can be cost cutting, it can be revenue generating, it can be risk prevention, Absolutely. It can be sales generating. So many different things. And there is an onus on the vendor, though, to make sure you have a story down. And there's an onus on the lender to understand it's not going to be as, because of the market doing this in the background, it's not going to be as clear cut as you probably like it to be. But again, it's going back to, what is the purpose? What's the main reason? Why did we invest in this technology? Is it accomplishing that? And they've got to be aligned on what it is that they're going to be able to accomplish for ROI.
Do you feel like the industry, I talk about this often, everybody's award winning, best at breed, everybody's press release is the first to market. And so I think we're setting up, and I've been on that side of the fence. I think we're setting up lenders to think that they're getting the absolute best, perfect. There's never going to be a bug. It's worked for everybody's solution, and that ROI can't be seen because everybody thinks it should be perfect.
Yeah. I think that's so true. I would say, honestly, look no further than everything that we deal with every day in our lives, just as humans. We're all consumers of all of this different technology out in the world. And what of it is flawless, right? We have issues ourselves all the time. So I think that's a fair and balanced way to look at it.
I agree.
Yeah. I want to go to the future because we're hearing AI this. We've got AI embedded in our system. So I want to get Sue Woodard's perspective on where's the future of mortgage tech partnership, mortgage tech and the partnership. Yeah.
Yeah. Is this really me, or is this an avatar of me that's been trained to talk like me? I don't know.
Never know.
So I will tell you that, and I'm very far from an AI expert and have chosen to, I'm not going to try to become one, right? I need to have a great understanding of it. But I have seen some things that over the past 6 months that have pretty much honestly have blown me away in terms of, I would say the biggest game changers I've seen are voice technology, avatar technology married to proactive data intelligence. Is like mind blowing.
Found on the proactive data challenge. I want to make sure our listeners understand what you're saying.
My gosh. I think we've had in the industry for a while, we've had what I would call reactive data intelligence. Mm-hmm. So trigger leads, things like that. Right. And somebody's moved, somebody's listed their house, somebody's got their credit pulled. You're being reactive to something going on. The industry.
Right. That's really good.
It has come a long ways towards starting to be more proactive and even predictive. Right? Yep. Being able to take this massive data. If we think about it, you go on Amazon, we talk for a little while. I go on Amazon, I go on Twitter, I go on anything. And all of a sudden it knows the things. And it's, Sue, you probably like this pair of shoes. I'm like, dang, I do like that pair of shoes. So I think we should, with all of the data that we have out there as on consumers, we're finally getting to the point where I am seeing some things that are exciting to me about predictive data intelligence, right? About things that help us predict life events, or when a life event happens, it's a good predictor that they're probably going to need to do something with their mortgage. That married with, like I said, the voice AI and the avatars are crazy good.
Getting better every single week and month. Yeah.
I got to say, they're pretty good.
Yeah, the video ones freak me out. Those are the ones where, and again, just to quickly explain it for everybody listening, where it's me, the software, you talk into it, you like, do all the stuff. After that, you can just feed scripts into it, and it looks like me giving the script. So, or the voice AI is unreal. Some of the things I've heard, talking to the person, like nothing I've ever heard before. It literally in the last 6 months, where it sounds literally like you're talking to a person,
and
what they're doing. In most cases, that's right. And they're available 24/7. They never call in sick. They don't have any people management issues. Yeah. And so I do think that's going to be a big game changer. Yeah. Now, I think the key is the data also all shows us, though, again, it's a human transaction with a lot of emotion in it. You said it earlier, David, or maybe it was you, Alan. There's so much emotion in a home purchase. There just is, because your family, you're moving. And so this is a life event for someone with a lot of emotion. Yeah. There is almost always a time when even experienced people, I'm going through, like we just sold our home. David, you know the story. We're moving, we're building another property. You better believe there is, as much as I know about all of this stuff and as many mortgages as I've done, there's a time where I want to reach out my hand and I need that human being there to answer some questions for me. Tell me some things.
What's really, as good as the technology is getting, I was talking to a psychologist who says we have as humans, a unique ability to recognize when it's technology and when it's not. He says we are getting better and better at the technology side. And it was answering a question about, will technology take over the business? It will enable, but it just cannot take over. That's a statement. No. I should have asked it as a question. Your thoughts on that?
I've always called it, David, pulling the ripcord. Everybody needs, you get lost in the tech. It's cool to start, but it can't last the whole relationship can't be tech driven.
Cannot. Yeah, it absolutely. And I think this is the shift that needs to take place.
Yeah.
Because we need to we got to recognize our human abilities and get comfortable with who you are. It's your frequency, it's your voice, it's who you are, that uniqueness, your iris, your fingerprint. No one else has it. And
That's right.
It is really important to develop that skill set and really settle in on that. That is, Oh, Sue, I could talk to you forever, and this Alan, I could tell you just so much fun. Where are you speaking next?
Next, let me think. Well, I'm attending IMB coming up
Good,
in
you'll be here
Austin,
in
Texas.
Austin. How good. We'll see you
I'll
there.
be there right there in Austin speaking at, I got all kinds of speaking engagements coming up, Dart Bank, and I'll be speaking at ICE in March and all kinds of fun things happening.
That is not surprising. The price of admission is worth it just to hear Sue speak. I mean that sincerely. The speech you gave the last 2 times at Total Expert, it's worth going to Total Expert just to hear you. And they put on probably, in my opinion, one of the best conferences in the industry. Really, Joe and the team there do a phenomenal job.
They do.
And you and Joe get up on stage. You do it individually, but my gosh, that was so rocky. Bandcamp. Go ask Sue about Bandcamp. How you take the movie Bandcamp and bring it to the stage and talk about mortgage technology. It was brilliantly done. I loved it.
It was fun. It was fun.
That was a real.
I have a couple questions for you if you still have a few minutes with us.
I do. Yeah.
Good. The first one is a little off topic. What have you seen recently on Netflix or streaming?
Landman.
Oh, is that good?
Yeah, it's really good. It's a spinoff of, it's Billy Bob Thornton. It's a spinoff.
That's
it's not
right.
really a spinoff, but it's by the
He's
Tyler
great.
Sheridan. And so
Yes.
he's ridiculously good, but
Yes.
it's not a family show.
Not a family show. All right.
Not a family show. So
I thought
fair
you
warning.
were going to say, and it was a total setup. I thought you were going to say Carry On with Jason Bateman because the mortgage industry kind of feels like that sometimes. And I figured
it
we
surely
would.
does. Right on.
Yeah, we could tie that directly into the partner versus vendor mindset and how many lenders are holding vendors hostage or vice versa. So curious of your thoughts on that.
Okay. I'll have to put that one on my list for sure.
It's so good to have you here, Sue. Thank you so much for joining us. It's just been awesome to have you back on the podcast. We want to interview you again. Keep us posted on where you're speaking. We'll share it with our audience. Alan, thank you for joining us. A man of technology, sitting in his new technology-enabled car, a Tesla, brand new, folks. He's doing the interview from his new Tesla. So cool. But it doesn't get better than that. So both of you, I want to thank you both so much.
Thank you, David. Thank you.
All right. Thanks.
Thank you, Sue,
Appreciate
for being
you
here.
both.
Appreciate
Thanks,
it.
everybody. Take care.
You've been listening to Lickin' on Lending. Our passion is to bring you the latest insights, trends, and updates from the world of mortgages. So on this show, if you're a seasoned industry veteran or just getting started, it's your go-to source for all things mortgage. We hope you've enjoyed the show. We'll be back soon. Take care, and we'll see you next time on Lickin' on Lending.